Another 1930s development was Bognor Town Football Club's new grandstand, opened by Mr. W.H. Fletcher at their ground in Nywood Lane. Little is known about the inaugural match, but the opposition strip suggests that they could have been Arsenal. This isn't as improbable as it may seem. The club sometimes trained here in preparation for big cup matches. In Kent, the Borough Council of Margate suggested that jaded Londoners should leave business cares behind and climb aboard the Thanet Pullman, which would carry them to the coast in 96 fleeting minutes. In this film of 1925, designed to whet their appetites, the town was reported as stimulating and endowed with great restorative powers. It basks in sunshine nearly all year round. And several features were highlighted, such as the bungalow, which provided refreshment, music and repose on its lawns and under its comfortable verandas. This was also a good base from which to explore other parts of Kent, with charabanc outings available to a variety of towns and villages around the area, including, of course, picturesque Canterbury. To anyone making such a trip, the cathedral city would have appeared much as it does in these clips, recorded in around 1924, in a film which is a simple tour of the streets. Known to this day for its historic architecture, you would be forgiven for thinking that Canterbury hasn't changed greatly over the decades, but whilst this is true of some buildings, others were lost during the Second World War, changing the appearance of the city through the post-war rebuild of the 1950s. And of course, the smaller details, shop fronts, road markings, signs and period vehicles all add up to a very different scene. A brochure about the city compiled by Canterbury and District Chamber of Trade in 1922 points out the never-failing supply of purest water and excellent drainage, recently perfected at a cost of £50,000, all combine to render Canterbury one of the most advantageous health resorts in Great Britain. And in a time when the British Empire was still going strong, suggests Canterbury as an ideal location for Anglo-Indians, retired officers and others searching for a delightful home. At this time, markets were still held weekly for people to trade corn, hops, horses and lean cattle, and occasionally, in the summer months, fruit and fruit trees. Fat stock and poultry were traded fortnightly, on Mondays, at the market in St George's Gate, forming part of the everyday scenery of 1920s Canterbury. With its historic links as capital of East Kent and ecclesiastical connections, as well as associations with literature through the centuries, the city has always attracted visitors, some of whom decide to stay. And in fact, since these pictures, the population has grown considerably, rising from around 24,000 in the mid-1920s to over 138,000 at the beginning of the 21st century. In Crawley, West Sussex, scenes of the Horse and Cattle Fair of 1928 were recorded. This footage was taken by local businessman Moses Nightingale and his son Percy, who had an interest in cinematography and produced a number of home movies and recorded local events during the interwar period. If we think heavy traffic is a recent occurrence, well, these scenes suggest otherwise. This is Sunday traffic in Brighton Road, Crawley, in 1930, and an array of period motor vehicles. And in August 1929, crowds flocked to the local recreation ground in Crawley to witness the opening of new public amusements and subsequently try them out. In a time before coverage of such events by any media other than newspapers, amateur filmmakers often filled a void by producing local news features which were screened in cinemas around the area. A fascinating glimpse of town life of decades past and the local community of which the Nightingale family were a part. Like many large cities, Portsmouth has changed over the years. The Guildhall, recorded here in its pre-war splendour, was reopened following major repairs after the war by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth in 1959, minus its spire. Not all the historic buildings in Portsmouth fared so well, however. The art gallery, which started life as the city's town hall, was totally destroyed during the war. And the Royal Garrison Church, which has 12th century origins, was burnt out, leaving just a shell, which was later preserved rather than restored. But Charles Dickens' birthplace, in Old Commercial Road, survived and is preserved as a museum, very much in contrast to the George Hotel, where Nelson spent his last night ashore before the Battle of Trafalgar. The High Street has a number of historic buildings, but like the George, many were destroyed during the Second World War. After the hostilities finally ended in 1945, the people of Portsmouth, like those elsewhere across Britain, rebuilt their lives and their city. In a new era of hope, with the threat of war now lifted, life could slowly return to normality, and simple pleasures like the miniature train at nearby Southsea were once again enjoyed in a relaxed atmosphere. The Isle of Wight car ferry, captured here in 1946, was introduced 19 years earlier, and was the first motorised vessel to operate the cross-Solent route between Portsmouth and Fishbourne, providing an important link and means of transporting goods to the island. After the war, the service was continued as usual, although for some time petrol was still rationed.